Play Pokemon. Tell us who you think is going to win this matchup between Eric and Treynor.
Hashtag Play Pokemon. Dark tends to beat Trevenant. that's my unofficial tweet right there.
So I think when you look at this matchup on paper, it is very heavily favored for Treynor, that Darkness type deck. All of Eric's Pokemon are weak to Darkness Pokemon. Trevenant gets knocked out easily by Yveltal EX, just an Evil Ball, or Darkrai EX and Night Spear, and it's very easy to say, well, I'm weak to that, I lose. I do think it's a little more complicated than that. I have seen the Trevenant deck be able to overcome this weakness a couple times, but the big factor is who goes first, and unfortunately for Eric, that was Treynor. And Treynor's going to be able to play all of these item cards on his first turn, perhaps get an Archeops or a Gallade out and really start to set up before Eric is able to disrupt him with that Trevenant and that Forest Curse ability.
Exactly. Being able to go first here for Treynor is actually even worse for Eric than normally the matchup could be. But the reason that I actually believe Eric has an even worse matchup than most of these Trevenant decks is because he doesn't seem to play any weakness policies at all, and that's actually something that we started to see from last weekend's regionals. Even though Seattle regionals wasn't particularly streamed, I did see people like, for example, Michael Pramois start playing like 3 weakness policies in his list, and he wanted to be so prepared for this matchup. However, Eric actually ignored the matchup altogether, and he just kind of accepted a loss here to this deck, which is kind of unfortunate for the poor guy since he happens to be playing against it in the finals.
Yeah, you can see Eric very laid back. He doesn't feel any pressure at all. When we talked to him, he's like, I'm glad to be taking second. He realizes this is not a great matchup for him. He's accepted it, and he said, my goal this weekend was just to avoid all the Darkness decks. And he did it pretty much thus far, but now we're in the finals. He can't avoid it any longer. And Treynor does hit that huge first turn Maxie's Hidden Ball trick to get Archeops. Archeops isn't super disruptive against Trevenant. They run so many ways to get around that ancient power ability. But anytime you just kind of have a Trevenant in your hand, you're like, oh, I can't play it from my hand anymore. That little disruption can make a big difference.
Yeah, I guess this continues the story of the top 8 for Treynor, really. Treynor has been consistently getting these turn 1 Archeops into play. And even in this matchup where it doesn't particularly seem to be all that important, he still manages to pull that off. So Treynor, no doubt, getting some excellent hands in this top 8 when he absolutely needs to. However, Eric, he's at a disadvantage, but he's not out yet, right?
Oh, definitely not. He can get Trevenant out. Treynor, he had a great first turn, got the Archeops out, got an energy onto Yveltal EX on the bench with that Dark Patch. One thing I do see missing is Darkrai EX. Keldeo EX in the active spot has a 2 retreat cost, so he's going to have to pay 2 energy to retreat. If he has Darkrai EX, Dark Cloak gives a free retreat cost to anything with the Darkness energy attached. And if he had Darkrai EX, he could just retreat, attach another energy to Yveltal EX, and start Evil Balling. With a Keldeo active and with no Darkrai in play, Eric might be able to buy a few turns with Treynor just having to pay retreat costs, and he even goes for the Team Flare Grunt.
Yeah, that Team Flare Grunt is actually going to do quite a bit for Eric there. It's going to secure that Keldeo into place for hopefully a little while longer, and more importantly, it's also going to let him start the item lock, allow it to get going.
Yeah, and this is how you have to beat this matchup. You have to buy time. The reason you lose is just because Yveltal can start knocking you out immediately, and you can't really stop it. Once it gets 2 energy and starts Evil Balling, you're in trouble. If you can lock something active like a Keldeo EX with 2 retreat, or that Archeops even, and just keep using Silent Fear, spread out damage, gives you time to set up a bunch of Trevenant, then you can win. It's just when you start getting knocked out turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, and you just never have a chance to stabilize, that's when you get overrun quickly.
Now, at the same time, though, we can't ignore the fact that Treynor already has a Darkness energy on his Yveltal EX, and that's exactly who he wants to be attacking with here. It seems like Eric is just running very cold against that card, and there's very little he can do about it once it does get going, if it ever does manage to.
Yeah, but at the same time, Treynor's in that same spot. No Darkrai. He'll have to pay another energy to retreat Keldeo EX, and if he's attaching to the active, that means he can't attach to the Yveltal EX. Can't play item cards like Dark Patch because of Forest Curse. So realistically, he's probably 2 turns away from getting an attack off with Yveltal EX, unless he finds that Darkrai EX quickly. Eric, on the other hand, we saw him Ultra Ball having to discard Trevenant Break, unable to break evolve this turn because of Archeops. So we do see that card making quite a bit of a difference. It would look a lot different if we saw Trevenant Break here being able to use Silent Fear this turn.
Yep. I absolutely do agree with you. However, at the same time, let's actually try to figure out if there's any chance that that Eric can really survive like the onslaught of an Yveltal EX with, say, 3 energy on it. At that point, will his Trevenants be able to do enough? Don't get me wrong, there's some bursting balloons and stuff like that will definitely allow him to have some sort of a chance, but will it be enough? That's the big question that we have to ask ourselves, because that's exactly how this game is looking like it's going to shape up.
Right now, Eric is digging for a couple more cards. He needs to find one more energy. I think he understands the urgency, the window he has here. If he finds one more energy, he can use Tree Slam. It's not a ton of damage, but it'll at least soften up Yveltal EX on the bench with 20 damage here. And he's unable to find the Psychic.
Very unfortunate for him that he did not have an energy there. Unfortunately for him, he has to pass the turn, and that allows, you see, the pep in his step for Treynor here. He sees that there's an opening for him, and sure enough, a Juniper does get rid of useless items like Computer Search, which would normally be extremely good.
Yeah, big 7 cards here for Treynor. Does he find Darkrai EX? Just slap it down, get the Dark Cloak, and retreat into Yveltal EX. Otherwise, Eric's going to have another turn where he can breathe in a sigh of relief. And, that Bursting Balloon is actually very big in this matchup. It's one of the ways you can generate damage onto Yveltal EX without having to attack it directly. And one of your main attackers in this matchup is actually that Wobbuffet. It can attack for 1 energy when you have Dimension Valley out. It does 10 plus 10 for each damage counter on the opponent's active Pokemon. And whenever you can Psychic Assault and knock out Yveltal EX, and then maybe play an N that same turn, that's one way you can start to come back.
Exactly. At the same time, whenever he does that, he will have his opponent will be allowed to play a lot of items, and no doubt he's going to be holding quite a few dark patches and stuff like that. So it'll be a close matchup if Eric does manage to pull this off here. But remember, step 1 is finding some energy so he can attack.
Yeah, and he's playing the Ultra Ball here. Once again, having to discard Trevenant Break. So the ancient power of Archeops, we're just seeing it in every match Treynor is playing against these evolution decks. Just so disruptive. Even, in his top 8 match against Owen, completely locking him out of the game because he just couldn't evolve his Pokemon, couldn't get his attackers out. We're seeing the same thing here. Eric unable to get Trevenant Break into play. He does have cards like Wally to bypass the ancient power, but he's been having to use his supporters for something else. He just can't seem to find Wally at the right time.
Yeah, he's been forced to find multiple cards throughout the game. He has to find energy cards, and he's had to find the Wally as well, which he's failed to do. So here in this specific turn, he actually had a Juniper. So once again, that's another turn without a Wally's.
Yeah, so at this point, I think Eric might be a turn too late on getting this Tree Slam going. He does have Computer Search, though, so he could find something here. I think he's probably going to go for Bursting Balloon. Go for a Tree Slam. You can then do 20 damage to the Yveltal EX on the bench, and then if it decides to attack, you can then do 6 more with the Bursting Balloon, and 80 damage is a perfect amount for Wobbuffet to come in, swing for 90, and finish it off.
How many Bursting Balloons has he gone through? Is this going to be the second or the third?
I think it might be number 3. He may have discarded one along the way. I guess we'll find out, but it's certainly 2 at the very least.
Right, it's at least 2. If it is number 3, he's going to be running low on these, and he's going to have to eventually get past the second Yveltal, unless, obviously, Treynor never really draws into that point of the game.
I mean, this is kind of costly for Treynor. He's going to have to burn 2 energy retreating this Keldeo EX, and sure, he'll get the knockout here, but if Wobbuffet comes in and knocks out Yveltal EX, he'll be left with no energy on board, and that could be a pretty devastating place for him to be in.
Right, and even if he doesn't find the Wobbuffet knockout, maybe something as simple as like a Lysander onto the Keldeo is going to be enough to provide him with enough time to be able to start setting up. There's a lot of options here for Eric, and he's definitely not out of the game quite yet.
Yeah, now the big thing here is when Eric has to use Wobbuffet to attack, it'll turn off a lot of Treynor's abilities, especially Archeops, the ancient power. This will allow him to evolve from the hand into Trevenant, but it gives him item cards back. That means we can see those cards like Dark Patch, we can see Floatstone to get free retreat cost, we can see Versus Seeker to get back supporters, and that can be the real game changer here. It'll all depend on what Treynor can do with his 1 turn of item cards.
You never know how confusing a name can be until you have the name Treynor in a Pokemon match. The first thing you said was something about Treynor's abilities, and I was just like, what?
Well, just like Treynor's mail.
Oh, man. So he does knock out that Yveltal, and that's going to be an opening here for Treynor. Will he be able to, right away, takes advantage of it by applying a float stone to that Keldeo? No doubt wanting to have done that much, much earlier. But in this case, he does have an Yveltal with Oblivion Wing, which is affectionately referred to as a baby Yveltal by some people. Yveltal Small by our fallen comrade.
Yeah.
And that's a great, great attacker here in this specific game.
Yeah, so, I mean, going into this, Eric said he wasn't very confident in the matchup, but, I mean, as you can see, Treynor went first. He got Archeops, played a Dark Patch, did all this great stuff, and Eric is still in this game. He's certainly not out of it by any means. Now, I still think Treynor has a bit of an advantage. Eric has quite a long way to go to collect all of his prize cards. He doesn't even have a Trevenant in play. But you can see there are openings for this Trevenant deck, especially with Bursting Balloon, to steal some knockouts here and there.
Yeah, that Bursting Balloon, that specific final Bursting Balloon, has been such a game changer. It's really taken out the only potential attacker that Treynor has been able to build. There is something to be said by Treynor's explosive start, but then kind of mediocre mid-game. But at the same time, I mean, that's part of the game. That happens to every deck and everybody. It's
it's just what happens against Trevenant when you can't play item cards. You're just going to run into dead spots in the middle of a game where you're like, I got 5 item cards. Okay. Can't do anything.
Yeah, sometimes you just cannot find that dark ride no matter how hard you try. Now, Treynor is in this specific situation, is actually in a really uncomfortable spot, and he's still trying to find a way out of it. Undoubtedly, he's going to want to find some sort of an attacker that really puts a lot of pressure and has high hit points.
Yeah, I think he's trying to decide which supporter he wants to take here. He could actually maxi again and get Gallade in the field. You can actually have 2 fighting Pokemon, and Gallade is actually pretty good against Trevenant just because you can Premonition and control your top card. So just having that in play every turn to Premonition over and over could be a big deal, and that's actually what he decides to go for.
That's a great point, and he is going to go for that. He plays a maxi, grabs the Gallade, draws 5 cards, and by the way, he's got a float stone on both of his high retreat cost Pokemon that he would not have to get like to get stuck in the active spot. So he's preparing for the Lysander quite well.
Certainly, and I mean, he's got the mobility now with Keldeo EX, has the float stone on it. He doesn't particularly need Darkrai EX anymore. Plays the Parallel City, points it towards Eric to limit his bench. He has to discard a Phantom as well as a useless EX he's already used the ability for. So, Treynor's starting to pick up speed a little bit, goes for the Oblivion Wing, but still nothing overwhelmingly powerful on his side.
On the other hand, though, Eric is still, he still has only a Wobbuffet active. He's definitely going to want to reconsider his options at this point since the Wobbuffet doesn't really deal any more damage. But he still hasn't gotten rid of the Archeops. The Archeops is still there, and he still doesn't have a Trevenant break, and that's really been what's been holding him back from really taking over this game.
Yeah, now Eric has an interesting choice here. I see he has a Lysander in hand. He could go ahead and play that and bring out something like Gallade that has a high retreat cost. It looks like that's what he's going to go for. Bring out the Gallade, force Treynor to have the resources to move it. Now, he can either leave Wobbuffet active and just Psychic Assault for 20, since you can't use Keldeo EX's Rush In on the bench. He could have also retreated to Trevenant and said, I'll at least turn off your item cards. But it looks like he's going with Wobbuffet.
Now, Treynor having 2 different turns actually he's going to go for a Getz's. Is this Getz is going to go big, or is it going to go home? It actually finds three different items. That's not a bad Getz's there. He does leave Eric with kind of a mediocre hand.
Yeah, Tierno, not bad. Draw 3. But he does shuffle in the item cards for Eric as well, so a bit of disruption. A lot of those cards were kind of redundant for Eric, though. He had a Float Stone, he had a couple of Versus Seeker, and he already has some supporters, so might not be the end of the world. But we see the dark patches start pouring in. 2 Darkness Energy out of the discard pile onto that Fright Knight Yveltal, and Treynor is now starting to power up some scary-looking Pokemon.
Does he have a way to get the Gallade out of the active spot, though? Remember, because of Wobbuffet's ability, the Keldeo cannot rush in.
And the answer is no. Eric draws his card for the turn, so is Lysander doing exactly what he wanted it to do, just buy a little bit of time? And, at this point, he's in a kind of a weird spot. I think he wants to retreat and get Trevenant Break and start using Silent Fear. But if he does that, then he gives Keldeo EX Rush In again because he won't have Wobbuffet active. So he might want to be waiting for a turn where he can slam down Xerosic, discard the Floatstone on Keldeo, and then retreat and start using Silent Fear.
We finally see the Wally to get the Trevenant break into play, and the Archeops has finally stopped affecting this board state. It took a while. It took about 15 minutes or so, but it finally happened. And at this point in time, we have a Trevenant break, which can really start to wreak havoc, especially if that Gallade is still stuck in the active position for a few turns.
Yeah, it's still anybody's game at this point, which is kind of bizarre when you think about kind of how it started. But one thing I do want to touch back on, Treynor used 2 Dark Patch on the Fright Knight Yveltal. In a lot of matchups, that's just a great card, right? You do 60 to an EX on the bench. I might actually prefer the other Yveltal with Darkness Blade. Since Pitch Black Spear only does 60 to the active, that's actually not enough to knock out a Trevenant Break in one hit. So having that option to knock out Trevenant Break in one attack, using Darkness Blade instead, I'm not sure long-term if that's the better way to go, but I'd certainly have to think about that.
Yeah, he might still have an opportunity to get the other Yveltal powered up. At the same time, though, his deck is looking extremely thin. Yeah. He versus Seekers for an N. Will he be playing the N now? I guess we still have to wait and see. It's going to be interesting, though, because as good as this matchup looks on paper, we've said that over and over again, but as good as this matchup looks on paper, it is just not working out for him right here.
And right now we see the Lysander bringing out Trevenant Break. It's not often we see Lysander bringing Trevenant into the active spot, but that's exactly what Treynor wants to do here. He's going to go for the Pitch Black Spear. 120 damage to the active, 60 to the Mewtwo EX on the bench. And I think Treynor just recognized, wow, I need to start picking up the pace here. I only have a few cards in my deck. I got to start winning.
So obviously the reason that that Treynor was finally able to rush in was because the Wobbuffet left the active spot, for those of you who didn't see that. And that allowed Treynor to finally start attacking with this Yveltal. At this point, though, is that too little too late? His deck size is something like 4 cards at this point, maybe 5. And even though he's got an N, he's still very limited in time. And like you said, his Yveltal just does not deal enough damage in this position.
Yeah, I kind of have to wonder, can Eric just kind of clear the game with, if he can use one Silent Fear, spread out a bunch of damage, can he actually finish up with those Wobbuffet and Mewtwo EX? If he's got enough damage on board, Psychic Assault starts doing some decent damage for Wobbuffet. Treynor just doesn't have any big hitters. He's got Yveltal with Fright Knight. He's got the other one just with 1 energy on it. But not anything that's threatening to do like 150 damage, 160 damage to knock out these big Pokemon.
Well, we do see a Silent Fear there, but not before Azerosic got rid of that Floatstone for that Keldeo. So now that Keldeo will not be able to rush in freely, and we won't be able to see maybe a switch up of attackers here where the other Yveltal would have been able to potentially knock out this Trevenant. Either way, we do have Treynor now being able to attack, and he'll be able to knock out this Trevenant break, leaving Eric with 0 Phantoms or Trevenants in play.
Yeah, I wonder if that was just a turn too late for Eric, having that Xerosic on the Floatstone, and actually Treynor clearing out his damaged Keldeo EX Parallel City this time, pointing it towards himself so he can have the smaller bench size, and we are going to see an end, but that Xerosic seemed like a turn too late or so. You wanted it when you could have Trevenant Break active and use Silent Fear everywhere, so that way you could trap something active and spread damage out. Now it's almost like, so what? I'm going to knock out Trevenant Break. What are you going to do? Attack me with Wobbuffet? You can only knock out my active. But maybe Eric was going for, kind of a long game here, saying, you don't have many cards left. So if I take away your Russian retreat option, maybe I can trap something active with Wobbuffet and win the game just by running you out of cards.
You always seem to find like that little edge that he might potentially have. That's a great way to potentially win the game, though, is assuming that Treynor has kind of run himself out of resources at some point. An AZ does bring up that Mewtwo. That's a big deal right there. That's how I potentially saw Treynor pulling this game off no matter what. At this point, will that be enough? I mean, he'll be able to play down the Mewtwo if he'd like. He'll be able to maybe attach a couple of energies. I don't know. Without a Trevenant, without your hallmark card, can you actually put up a fight against this Yveltal deck?
Yeah, I don't know. But one of the wonderful parts about the Pokemon TCG is that you have multiple paths to victory. You can win by knocking out your opponent's Pokemon. You can win by running them out of resources. Sometimes it just comes down to your opponent just doesn't have enough cards left in their deck and they can't win. So you always have to keep an eye out for how many resources your opponent has used. Look for any little way you can win, especially if you're Eric in this lopsided matchup traditionally for the Darkness type deck. You just got to find any edge you can take.
And it looks like Treynor's down to something like 2 cards. Yep, sure enough, Eric spreads out that deck, and there's only 2 cards left in it. He's only... Oh, he just being Treynor, just passes the turn.
Wow. That's a little strange to me. I saw Treynor actually had Fighting Fury Belt in his hand, and usually you can't use that on Fright Night Yveltal, right? Your ability turns off tools.
Right.
But with Wobbuffet active, you actually could have attached the Fighting Fury Belt, done the Pitch Black Spear for 70 instead of 60, and we would see that Wobbuffet knocked out right now. So potentially an oversight there that could change the entire outcome of this game.
And now...
Eric just decides to pass. He's committed to this strategy. He's saying, you know what? I'm going to run you out of cards. You only have 1 card left. You have 4 prizes to take. I don't think you can win this game before you run out of cards. And I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. It's going to be extremely close, but I think Eric might have been able to pull this off. I mean, how do you knock out that Wobbuffet? That Wobbuffet's got too much HP. 110 hit points is not very easy for Treynor to pull off.
I mean, he can knock out Wobbuffet, but if Eric benches something else, he's still going to take 3 prizes.
Well, right, exactly.
So I think Eric playing an Ultra Ball, looking through his deck, seeing if there's anything he can take here. Doesn't take anything. He has the Mewtwo EX in his hand. And Mewtwo EX, of course, is going to be interesting because it has 170 HP. It's not easily knocked out.
Now, here's another thing: is the more cards he plays, the more cards you draw with Colress.
Yeah.
He only played 1 bench Pokemon though, so that means that Colress is only going to draw 4 cards. He had the potential to potentially find more Pokemon, which would have forced a larger Colress out of him. Only drawing 4 cards, though, does give Treynor a little bit more of a breath of life. This is turning into a really close game, game 1.
Yeah, it's just all about resource management in this game. I'm curious to see how many cards Treynor has left in his deck after that Colress.
I would assume something like 3 here, so there goes a knockout.
I mean, if it's 3 cards, I don't know if Eric can, survive that long. And actually, he's just going to play the N and kind of switch gears. He's saying, oh, man, it didn't work. He had a way to shuffle cards back into his deck. Now I have to shift gears and try to take knockouts with Mewtwo EX.
Once again, really can't understate how close this is going to be. There's very little ways to really apply too much pressure to a Mewtwo EX. So if maybe he starts finding ways to maybe recur AZ or something like that, he still has a chance.
Yeah, I mean, he does have double colorless energy on the Gallade. He can, if he gets a supporter, he can Sensitive Blade for 130 damage. It's a 2-hit knockout. So there's plenty of pressure to be applied here.
We've seen Eric plays Erosic, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but if Eric can knock out Gallade, then Treynor, he has the Pitch Black Spear from Yveltal. That's only 60 damage, though. So
Shaman's going to draw 5
Eric
cards from
pull
Eric.
this out. He just needs to find 1 energy. He even finds the Bursting Balloon. Could be helpful. Won't do much against that Fright Night Yveltal, but there's almost no harm of putting it down, I think. That Fright Night actually prevents the Bursting Balloon from getting discarded, even though it'll have no effect. It'll actually stay there because of Fright Night, too. So I think you can put it down. If you get hit by Oblivion Wing, it'll deal 60. That could help out. If Fright Night comes out and uses Pitch Black Spear, it actually doesn't get discarded. So
now, is the Mewtwo going to knock out this Gallade?
Yeah, I think you have to at this point.
Gallade, yeah.
Yeah, at this point, you've realized you don't have enough time to run Treynor out of cards. You have to start attacking and taking prizes, and I think it's very close. He might be able to do it, especially depending on how many resources Treynor has left. All 4 double colorless energy in the discard pile. Tons of energy in the discard pile. Dark Patch is gone. The one thing he has going for him is Oblivion Wing on that Yveltal, and here it comes. He's going to start using that Oblivion Wing and dealing some damage.
He recognizes that the Oblivion Wing is the correct attack here, and he does Oblivion Wing. No doubt going to be attaching that energy to that Yveltal EX, and he now has a path to victory, assuming that it'll be enough. Does Eric have any type of an answer to this?
I'm not sure. I think this is where Bursting Balloon would have been huge. I don't think a side drive is enough to take down this Yveltal. It'll be just a little bit short. So if he had Bursting Balloon, dealt 60 damage, he could have used side drive here, gotten the knockout, and then Treynor might not have had another energy to power up that Yveltal EX. But the way it stands now, he'll be able to Oblivion Wing 1 more time, and then he'll be able to power up Yveltal EX on the bench and go for the knockout.
Yeah, there are no damage modifiers here for the Mewtwo deck.
Yeah, and Eric's going to go for the Lysander and say, you know what, I'm going to go for the Yveltal EX. Going to try to deck out his opponent once again.
Now, Eric actually seems to have a very small deck, maybe even a single card deck.
Yeah, but at this point, I think it's a little too late. I think Eric's just been one step too slow every step of the way here. Treynor's just had just enough to keep himself away from decking out, just barely in the lead here. I know the one card in his hand is the one he was looking for earlier in the game, is that Darkrai EX. And Eric was trying to stall for time, maybe trap something active, but Darkrai EX is going to save the day for Treynor. He'll be able to retreat now thanks to Dark Cloak and get off another Oblivion Wing. And I think at that point, Treynor's just too solidified. He has Yveltal with Fright Knight ready. He has Yveltal EX ready to Evil Ball. And I don't know if Eric can avoid a knockout at this point.
I mean, realistically, you probably can't. But if you have something like a Lysander, Wobbuffet, maybe you can, get the Darkrai stuck in the active position. Something along those lines that can still happen. But Eric's just running so low on resources.
He has 0 cards in his deck now.
0 cards in his deck and something like 4 cards in his hand. So even if he does that, he'll leave himself with a couple of cards in hand.
Yeah, the tables have turned at this point. Maybe if Eric has like a Super Rod, something like that. I don't actually think he has one left.
No, I don't think so.
He's just burned through too many cards. He might have to play. Yeah, he's gonna have to play N, shuffle his hand in, and draw 3 cards. But at this point, I think Treynor has more cards than him. Eric's also going to draw an extra card because he has one more prize card. So this resource management battle is just flipped back and forth, but I think Eric might be at the point where it's too late for him.
Yeah, honestly, kudos to Treynor for having played that resource management battle extremely well. He didn't overextend his hand like a lot of people might have done in that specific situation. He just kind of kept holding on to his resources, and then a very fortunate Colress for 4 was more than left him with more than enough cards to finish this game off.
Yeah, now this is kind of a bizarre scenario. Treynor actually used Oblivion Wing to knock out, or not to knock out, but to get an energy onto Darkrai EX instead of Yveltal EX. So he could have threatened an Evil Ball this turn, but instead he went on to Darkrai EX. And actually, Treynor thought his active would get knocked out from Bursting Balloon. It does have Fighting Fury Belt, so it should actually have some HP left. I think he's at 150 damage at this point. But deciding to Oblivion Wing onto Yveltal EX instead, or to Darkrai EX instead of Yveltal EX, made it so he couldn't Evil Ball this turn. So it gave Eric one more turn to do something. And I don't know if Eric can do anything at this point, but it's certainly interesting.
Yeah, the Fighting Fury Belt does come into play in this specific situation, but just not enough.
Man, so close for Eric.
I have a lot of questions to ask at the end of this game. So many things happened that I just did not expect to happen. On paper, when we were discussing this match, it just seemed like it was going to be a very one-dimensional, one-sided match. But at the same time, it seems like as the game played out, we saw it play out completely different than what we expected. So many things happened. First of all, that Archeops came down, and it really messed with Eric's early game. He never found the Wallies to really start applying Trevenant break pressure, so he had to find alternate ways to try to win the game. Those alternate ways ended up actually working out extremely well for him.
Yeah, Eric actually plays 2 Wobbuffet and the Mewtwo EX, and those aren't actually very bad against this deck. I think if you were just playing this straight up and it was just like a Mewtwo Wobbuffet deck, you'd probably get destroyed pretty quickly by Yveltal EX. But the fact that Treynor has to go through so many awkward steps where, he might have to play a Juniper, discard a bunch of his items, and then you get to this late game scenario where he's burned through a lot of cards. He had to because of Forest Curse. Then all of a sudden, Wobbuffet comes out, and it's like, oh, you can't use abilities. And it puts Treynor in awkward spots where he can't use Rush In with Keldeo or Dark Cloak on Darkrai, things like that. Mewtwo comes out, and it's like, oh, that has 170 HP. Everything else gets knocked out pretty easily. Now I have to commit more cards to knock that out. And it's just switching gears all the time can put some pressure on Treynor. And I'll be extremely interested to see what happens here in game number 2 as they set up. And Eric is the one going first.
I have to ask you, this game, honestly, felt like it was Eric's best chance at, potentially stealing a game and then maybe having game 3 go where he starts first and gets a turn 1 Trevenant or something like that, right? It almost worked out for him, but it didn't quite do so. Does that mean, is all hope lost here for the Trevenant deck?
Oh, no, certainly not. That's an extremely disappointing scenario where, you're going second, you fight back so hard, You come up with ways to win, and your opponent just barely beats you in this long game and in what's traditionally a bad matchup for you. But I think if you're Eric, that might actually give you some hope, maybe some confidence. You're going first, game 2. If you can get the turn 1 Trevenant, prevent Treynor from playing item cards, win this game, then in a game 3, you're like, that really wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Now, maybe if I tighten up my play, do a few things differently, maybe I can win a game 3 and win this tournament.
Exactly. Now, we did see Eric actually mulligan his hand away, so Treynor will start the game with an additional card as he starts the game on going first as well. Or actually going second this time around, because Eric actually more than likely is going to choose to go first, I'm sure.
Yeah, and those mulligans are actually pretty relevant because Eric's turn 1 supporter of choice is going to be Wally. He wants to Wally, get Trevenant in play on the first turn, and go from there. Usually when your opponent plays, or when your opponent gets some cards off of mulligans, what you want to do is play N, reset their hand to 6 so they can't get that card advantage over you. But Eric always wants to be playing Wally on the first turn, but unfortunately he opens with Wobbuffet, and that's just not a great starter for him. Cannot get Trevenant on the first turn unless you have Phantom. And yeah, with that Juniper, Treynor is going to be free to play his item cards on the first turn. There will be no first turn Trevenant in this game, and that's got to feel bad for Eric.
Yeah, he was forced to Juniper away this actually nice-looking hand of like Trevenant Break and a couple of other cards, but he had a Wobbuffet start, and the Wobbuffet start, while solid against some decks, you still want to get a Phantom, Ascension start, maybe not Ascension start, but a Phantom Wally start, and that's how you really start putting the pressure on from the very first turn of the game if you go first.
Yeah, Wobbuffet is a good starter, don't get me wrong. Stops abilities, it'll stop things like Shaman EX and Jirachi EX. It'll prevent Treynor from getting any kind of super explosive turn where, at the end of it we see like 3 Dark Patches and Yveltal EX attacking you for a knockout. Like, I don't think that'll happen when he starts with Wobbuffet, but he gets to do things like this. Play a Battle Compressor, get stuff in the discard pile, play an Ultra Ball, play Computer Search, just get his board set up, and the biggest one of all, play Dark Patch. When he can get extra energy and play quickly, that's just so difficult for Eric to deal with. He needs time to set up. He needs to slow down these big Pokemon, and he can't do it when he can play Dark Patch.
This is looking like it's going to be an extremely strong start by Treynor. Not only did he have the Battle Compressor getting the Maxi in the discard pile, but he's got a Versus Seeker in hand, and now he had a Computer Search in hand, which is going to be discarded for which is going to be discarding an Archeops, which already has the combo in the discard pile. You already saw your opponent didn't have a Wally's last turn. You might stop him from having a Trevenant Break anytime soon this time again.
Yeah, Treynor playing Ultra Ball here. He's discarded a lot of his cards. I wonder what Pokemon he's going to find here. Can't be Shaman EX or Jirachi EX because you can't use the abilities here. It looks like he's going for the Fright Knight Yveltal. Plays the Versus Seeker with 0 cards. Does he actually have the Maxi again?
He does have the Maxi. He Battle Compressored the Maxi away, and
nice.
He discarded the Archeops with a Computer Search, so he has a turn 1 Maxi here for an Archeops, and that's going to draw him 5 cards, and more importantly, Archeops is in play on his very first turn of the game again.
Yikes. That's just an incredible start for Treynor. I mean, when you're doing that without even using abilities, you know it's your day.
And more importantly as well is the fact that he's going to have... he's Dark Patching here, but he only had 1 Darkness Energy in the discard pile, I believe. So either way, he was going to get that back, whether it be by Oblivion Wing or Dark Patch.
Yeah, that's an interesting spot where you're like, do I play Dark Patch even though Oblivion Wing can get it back, or do I hold Dark Patch for later? And I think you just want to get rid of the item card. I think that's a close call, though. You got to think eventually you'll have your item cards back, so maybe that Dark Patch is useful later. But either way, the important thing is Treynor ends his first turn with 3 energy in play. Sure, they're spread out. He doesn't have a big Evil Ball setup, but all he really needs is 2 energy on Yveltal EX to Evil Ball for a knockout on a Trevenant, and that's a really big deal.
This is very reminiscent of the World's Finals from last year, where you saw one player just have a dominant start over and over again. Last time it was with Archies. This time around it seems to be with Maxis. And now we're seeing really the kind of power that you can really have when you have these insane starts. An Archeops is really going to put a big hurting on Eric here.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite as bad as the World's Finals. I mean, come on, I was over in like 10 minutes.
Well, this is a slower version of that, but still.
Sorry, Maze, but yeah, I mean, this does look good for Treynor. He's got a lot of stuff going for him. I actually don't know if he has a supporter in his hand, though, so as good as his first turn was, he might not have a good follow-up. The unfortunate thing for Eric is I think he's scared to get Trevenant right now. I mean, what happens when you use Ascension? You get a Trevenant, and then you get hit for 60 by Oblivion Wing. Not a great spot to be in, so he's actually going to continue with Wobbuffet. Actually just attack for 10 damage with that, put a Bursting Balloon on the active, maybe try to buy some time. But the problem is he's not going to put on any real pressure. 10 damage is nothing. Sure, next turn it'll add up to 20 damage, and then 30 damage, and then... but it just takes far too long for him to put on pressure with this, and he's going to give Treynor a chance to draw out of this bad spot.
Seems kind of ironic that Wobbuffet has a Bursting Balloon on it. But either way, there is a Dimension Valley coming down, as well as quite a few cards coming down for Eric. He's still trying to keep himself in this game, even though his opponent, and Colress is going to get him 6 cards here, but even though his opponent had such an insane start, he's not letting that get him down. He's got to find a way out of this, and hopefully that Colress finds him something.
Yeah, Treynor had a great start, but it stopped right there. I mean, he's just doing 30 damage. Once again, he doesn't have Darkrai EX for the Dark Cloak. Even if he did, Wobbuffet's Bide Barricade would stop it, but he just doesn't have the means to put on a lot of pressure. So if Eric can kind of sit back, set up a few Trevenant Break, and set up a spot where he can start using Silent Fear, spread out some damage, then Wobbuffet will be a very effective attacker later. So I think the more time that goes on, as long as Eric can set up a bunch of Trevenant, he might be in a decent spot, but with each passing turn, Treynor also gets one more opportunity to draw something like Professor Juniper.
Right, and also you have to keep in mind that there's an Yveltal EX just waiting to come into the into the active spot. It's like it's begging, put me in, coach, and there it is. It's getting put in. The Yveltal in the active position actually got a second darkness energy attached to it, and it just chose to retreat in order for the Yveltal EX to do some evil ball damage here. That's 80 damage onto this active Wobbuffet.
And now Treynor actually gave away a lot of information. He went to put down Jirachi EX, tried to use Stellar Guidance, and then realized, ooh, I can't do that. Pulled it back into his hands. So now Eric knows the second he retreats Wobbuffet, a Stellar Guidance is happening for Treynor, and he's getting a supporter card. So, I mean, that's an awkward spot to be in. You can't attack with Wobbuffet forever, but maybe pick your spot here.
Well, in this specific situation, when you have the Bursting Balloon attached to the active Wobbuffet, I'm pretty sure you've committed to to having it stuck in the active position for at least another turn. But, you know... I think if you're the Trevenant player, you're kind of assuming your opponent's going to find a way out of this situation once the Wobbuffet goes to the bench. So, yes, it's definitely not something you want to be showing for no reason, but might not end up being quite as hurtful. And he's just going to pass the turn, wisely so. You do not want to be losing that Yveltal EX, and I think you just kind of have to survive the little Wobbuffet Bursting Balloon onslaught.
Yeah, now... like I said before, there's no Darkrai EX for Treynor. So we could see a strange spot where Eric starts getting Trevenant Break into play. And then he plays Lysander and brings out maybe that Archeops with a high retreat cost. And keeps it stuck in the active spot and keeps using Silent Fear, spreads a bunch of damage. If Treynor's unable to retreat that Archeops, you could see Silent Fear happening 2, 3, 4 times and just spreading so much damage. And that's when Wobbuffet can come in and clean up. So... if Eric can ever find an opportunity to sneak in a couple of those Silent Fear attacks without getting knocked out in return, I think he'll actually be fine.
Yeah, that's a great potential play that he can make. But at the same time, he's got to find the resources to be able to make it. You need to have, for example, a Wally and a Lysander, which is 2 different supporters.
Well, he does have Wobbuffet active, so he can evolve into Trevenant Break right here. Fair. He's had Trevenant out for a turn. So, I mean, he certainly could do that, and I do think he needs to evolve to Trevenant Break soon. You only have Wobbuffet for so long, it's going to get knocked out, so take advantage of that Bide Barricade while you can. Don't let Archeops disrupt you forever.
Great points.
Thank you.
All right, so... I wonder what he got with that computer search, by the way.
I think he got Team Flare Grunt, which is actually a pretty interesting choice here because... Treynor hasn't shown that he has any energy. He's actually discarded 2 by retreating the regular Yveltal. So now he doesn't have any energy in his hand. I don't think he has any... Oop, never mind.
Spoke a little too soon there, Kyle.
Well, there's double colorless energy, and that's a pretty big deal. Oh, there's Professor Juniper as well.
A sick top deck by Treynor is going to give him 7 additional cards, and remember, he's got a Yveltal EX in the active position that's just running things over. He has a Fighting Fury belt. Does he have something like a Floatstone to get himself out of that? To get that Archeops out of that danger zone. That danger zone is very important here. That's going to be one way that that if you're Eric, you can still come back into this game with.
I think this is starting to look bad for Eric. He missed his window of opportunity to take advantage of a potential slow hand for Treynor. This is where it gets really scary. Yveltal EX is knocking out pretty much everything you have. You're weak to darkness if you're Trevenant. Wobbuffet already has damage on it, going to get knocked out by Evil Ball or Y-Cyclone. And with the Fighting Fury belt, it has 210 HP. You just have this monster Pokemon knocking you out every single turn, and none of your Pokemon deal enough direct damage to deal with it. So I wouldn't be surprised if this Yveltal EX cleared out 3, 4, 5 Pokemon on Eric's side, or even straight up wins him the game.
Now Eric is forced to activate the other Wobbuffet here. No matter what,
sums it up.
Yeah, I was like, well, no, that won't work either. There's so many different things that he can do, but none of them seem to be particularly strong here. He's actually going to be retreating the Wobbuffet and activating the Trevenant. He's tired of having his opponent giving his opponent free reign with these item cards.
Yeah, he's going to go for a Tree Slam, doing 60 and then 20 to a couple other of those big birds on the bench. But yeah, as long as Treynor can just keep attaching energy every turn, he's going to keep using Evil Ball. And this is why this matchup is regarded as so unfavorable for the Trevenant deck. When these attackers do get powered up and you don't stop them, they just take a prize every turn. There's not much you can do about it. And that is just kind of the reality of what's happening here. Now we just have Yveltal EX Evil Balling everything in its path, destroying everything as it does. And what can Eric do here? He can Psychic Assault. I don't think that's enough damage. It'll actually do 100, still leaving the Yveltal EX with 20 thanks to the Fighting Fury belt. And it's just not a good spot to be in.
I mean, Eric said it best himself, right? He's happy to be taking second place here.
He does find Trevenant Break at last, so he's going to spread some damage out with that Silent Fear. Continue to take away the item cards, at least on Treynor's side, and set up for a Psychic Assault knockout next turn, but it feels like Eric's running out of stuff. Sure, he can come up with Wobbuffet next turn, knock out that Yveltal EX, but at this point, Treynor has drawn enough stuff where he can power up the next one, Evil Ball again, and I don't think Eric has enough stuff to deal with 2 of those Yveltal EX.
He would need a lot of stuff, and it seems like he's kind of running out of this stuff because not only is he out of Pokemon and play and stuff like that, but he seems to be running out of resources in his deck as well. He's been Junipering quite often, playing all these different cards, and they haven't been accruing to enough cards because once that Yveltal deck did get going, sure enough, it was going to be more than enough to really seal out this game against the Dark Weak deck.
Yeah, another weird interaction here. Treynor tries to, or he attacks into the Bursting Balloon, thinks his Yveltal EX gets knocked out, but he's got Fighting Fury belt, so still has the extra HP. That's going to make it really awkward for Eric to deal with it. He's going to have to attack into it and knock it out. There are some weird lines of plays he could take. He's going to go for the Xerosic.
The Xerosic is going to get it's going to knock out this Yveltal EX because it had 180 damage on it. So once the Fighting Fury belt goes off, it goes back to its original 170 HP. Down it goes, and that actually gives a couple of prizes here for Eric.
Yeah, that's going to force an awkward decision for Treynor, which Pokemon to promote. It looks like he decides to go for the Fright Knight Yveltal, saying, you know what, I don't really care if this goes down. His main priority is just Yveltal EX being able to Evil Ball. And that's why I think if Eric just used Xerosic on the double colorless on the Yveltal EX and then knocked out the active one, that might have given him a better chance here. Now there's just a fully powered Pokemon ready to attack him, and it's just not a good spot to be in.
A trainer's mail here from Treynor. He still is. He can find anything he wants. He can still play whatever he wants.
I'm going to guess Dark Patch.
I guess that's a reasonable choice.
Yeah. Again, if he can just load up a big attacker, Eric can't stop him at this point. He's going to decide to continue to spread out his energy. Doesn't want to be stuck in that spot where something gets Lysandered active and he can't do anything about it. And the 3 energy on Yveltal EX is enough to keep attacking. But yeah, all Treynor has to do is power up his Pokemon and attack. And looks like Phantom is going to come active. We can see just a pitch black spear knockout on the Phantom. Yveltal EX on the bench, and I'm struggling. I can't see a way out for Eric.
Down goes the Phantom. It leaves Eric with only a Wobbuffet in play for a while, but now another Phantom comes down, and now an N. Here's one way, sort of. It does bring Treynor down to 2 cards in hand, and it does give Eric a couple of card advantage. But once again, the problem isn't necessarily in the hand size. It's got to do with the board. The board position for Treynor is just overwhelming at this point, and it's got to do with the fact that eventually he was going to draw out of that dead draw that he had for a while.
It sure seems like it, and I'm just trying to figure out any little way for Eric to come back in this game. He's going to knock out the Fright Night Yveltal, take a prize. He'll go down to 3 prizes, but the problem is the big Yveltal EX with all the energy on it. Maybe if Eric gets another Xerosic or Team Flare Grunt, he can discard energy off of it. I'm not quite sure how many energy that Treynor has gone through at this point, but you got to start going for desperation tactics if you're Eric. You got to see how much stuff has he gone through. Can I, steal a win if he runs out of resources? Plays a Professor Juniper, so draws some more cards. Any way possible, Eric's got to come up with something. It just doesn't look good right now.
There's something like I don't know, I don't want to guess too much, but something like a very low deck size, let's say that amount for Treynor, and he does knock out that Wobbuffet as we had expected. Down goes the Wobbuffet, only a single Phantom left in play for Eric, but Eric does AZ.
Goes out with